In today's video, I'm going to take a moment and walk you through my approach to writing great prompts and show you some templates and some tools that can help you to get a much better output from the LLM models that you're using. When I was growing up, my parents would always say, think before you speak. And that phrase is just as relevant today in terms of think before you prompt. Now, one of the great things about tools like Claude or ChatGPT or Gemini is that you've just got a text box, so you can ask something magical and get something immediately back. But that's also the worst part of these tools, in that you have this tyranny of the blank box. And you start typing and then you hit return, probably way before you should have done, and suddenly you get a partial response back that's not got the detail and the context of what you actually wanted to ask. So there's a couple of ways that I think about writing great prompts. The first thing is just to remember that LLMs are probabilistic, not deterministic. Now that sounds complicated, but probabilistic means that the tool is providing what it thinks is probably the right answer, or probably the next word or set of words in your answer. It's not the definite answer. And that conflicts or competes with how traditional software has been written, which is kind of hard coded. If you ask Salesforce or Workday the same question 100 times, you will get the same answer because it has been coded up to be deterministic. But with an LLM, if you ask the same question 100 times, you will get slightly varying responses. So we should think of that when we're thinking about what we ask these tools. If we're asking for very specific answers, what is, who is, when was, how much, then we're asking for a specific number or date or response. And this is not what LLMs are great at, although they are fairly competent. The best way of using these tools is to think about more creative prompts. Can you help me think through this situation? How would you approach this challenge? What is it that I'm missing that I should be thinking about? What options are there? These are the types of questions that are very, very well designed for an LLM, who can help you to create multiple responses and answers. Now, when you're then thinking about the way that you write your prompts, I break it up into these 4 sections. The first is about context. If you just go to Google, or you just go to ChatGPT or Claude and just ask a question such as, can you help me build a marketing plan? You're going to get a very generic answer because it doesn't understand who you are, the company you work for, the products that you've got. So when you're writing your prompt, you want to provide as much of this context and background information as possible so that the LLM can provide you with the best results. Specific examples here are providing the LLM with a role. You are a legal expert working in a B2B SaaS business, whatever that might be. The next is about being really, really clear about what it is that you want from the LLM. And here, I think a lot about having an intern or an apprentice that has just joined your company. If you want to get a good quality output from that new individual, you've got to be very, very specific and clear about what it is that you want, the format of the response that you want to have back, and defining the scope of their research or the answer that you want from them. You'd then probably provide that intern or apprentice with a bit of coaching. So how I would typically approach this problem is to do that step first, then do that step, and then do that. So go and research, then write your response, and then review what you've written and check it for spelling errors. And that's what we call chain of thought or reasoning. It's how we work as humans, and we want to provide the LLM with that kind of guidance as well. Secondly, you might provide that intern with an explanation of the type of quality that you want. Right, I want it in UK English. I want it in the format of a written document or written prose, or I want bullet points. And then you might talk about the output preferences. So maybe you want a full document, maybe you want an Excel. What is it that you want out of this tool? And then the final part is about refinement. So having created your first response, don't just give me your first draft. Actually, I want you to go back and take a look back at the question, take a look at what you've created, and then work out, is that an appropriate response? And if there were one or two ways that you would improve it, what is it that you would do? And this is, again, great advice that you can replicate into your LLM. Now, there's quite a lot there, and this, going back to what I said about the tyranny of the input box, is that to write all of that out in that empty input box, the temptation to just hit return before you've actually finished crafting or editing your prompt is very, very strong. So my approach, if I'm creating a prompt that is for something that is detailed and certainly something that I'll be reusing, is to actually start in a Google Doc or a Word doc if you're in the Microsoft family, and then to create that before you then take that over to Claude, OpenAI, or whichever LLM you're using. And so let me dive over to give you an example of a prompt design template that I use. So I'll use this just for thinking through a prompt that I'm trying to create. So who's going to use this prompt? Now, it might be for me, but within a client, it might be a specific role. It might be a team. It might be a region or geography. It might be someone that's new to prompting or an expert in this task. Where is this prompt going to be used? Is it going to be used just in the web app, or is the client building something through an API? What is the purpose of the prompt? Like, what is someone going to do with the output of this? Is it to then go on to complete another task? Is it they just want an answer? Do they want the prompt to role play with them? Is it to create some kind of document that they can use? If we are doing document generation, then are there any templates? This is what the meeting agenda should look like. This is what the account plan should look like. And then we can incorporate that into the prompt. What other context sources would inform this prompt? So if we were speaking with an intern or an apprentice, would we be asking them to go and research these 2 or 3 websites? Would there be a specific regulation or compliance document that we'd need them to read? So what else should inform the prompt? Then examples. Now, examples are one of the best ways to improve the quality of your responses. And so with an example, what we're going to provide is, this is what a good output would look like, and this is what a bad output would look like. So if we think about creating a meeting agenda, well, we've got the template, and let's fill out that template 2 or 3 times with what a great meeting agenda would look like. And then let's create 2 or 3 bad meeting agendas where maybe it's just got one-word answers and bits are left empty. This really helps the LLM to understand what it is that you want. Next up is exceptions. So what should the LLM do when the user is not able to provide relevant information? So let's take the example of a meeting agenda. Well, one of the key things might be, who are going to be the attendees for this meeting? Well, let's say the person doesn't know who the attendees are. So what should the prompt do if the user says that? So you might say, well, if the user does not know who the attendees are, put in a placeholder and say that the user should fill this in once they've got the details. What we don't want is that the LLM just makes up names instead. So detail what those exceptions might be and how the LLM should handle it. And then this is one that I really love, which is, how should the prompt engage with the user? Is this a very formal, work-related engagement where we're just going through the motions? Or could this be quite a friendly prompt, a friendly response? Are they supposed to coach the user, and instead of giving them the answers, they're supposed to guide the user to find their own answers. So having a think through this for all of your prompts is a really good way of getting all of that detail before you actually start writing that prompt. Now I'm going to jump over to a couple of tools that are provided by the LLM providers themselves to really help you to draft and iterate on great prompts. So I'm going to show you both the Anthropic Console and then the chat playground from OpenAI. Now, to get into both of these, you can't use these if you've just got a web account. If you just signed up to ChatGPT, even if you're on a paid account, you won't have access to this. You need to sign up to a developer or an API account. So if you just go to openai.com, you'll need to set up an account, and you'll need to load it up with the minimum amount of dollars, euros, or pounds. That could be anything from $10 or $20, I believe. But that will give you access to the developer environment. Now, you don't actually need to be a developer to use what I'm going to show you here, but the playground is a very, very useful tool to help you to iterate on your prompts. I'm going to spend most of my time in the Anthropic one. I'm going to show you in a minute, but did want to highlight that ChatGPT or OpenAI does provide this to you. A system message, the user messages. Here you can choose which model you want to test it again, and against, and a few other configurations that you can play around with there. So that is the OpenAI version. But I'm going to show you the Anthropic one because that's the tool that I tend to use most often. Here it's called the Workbench. And again, you'll have set up a developer or an API account. And once you're in that, you've loaded up with $20 or so, then you've got access to the Workbench. And here I've created a basic legal prompt. Now, a few things that I'll call out. So firstly, this might be the first time that you've come across the phrase of a system prompt. Behind all of the prompts that you're sending in through ChatGPT or Claude, there are system prompts that go alongside your text and guide the LLM into the role that they should play and how they should react. So here, for example, a system prompt: you are a UK-based legal advisor acting as a coach to our corporate legal team to help assess third-party contracts and determine a path to minimizing the risks to our business. Here also, you might put in some of that information about how you want the LLM to engage. I want you to be friendly. I want to be chatty. I want you to be a coach. I want you to provide bullet point answers, whatever that might be. What I've then done is create a basic prompt here. Now, I should say this is 4 or 5 paragraphs. My actual prompts tend to be anything up to 9 pages long once they've got all of the different examples and exceptions. So this is just an example, a simple example. You'll be provided with a contract, which would be the document that comes over from the user, provided by a potential supplier, along with a document providing our terms of business and a fallback clause here. And that's another document that will be uploaded. You're to review the provided contract and summarize the terms that provide most risk of contradicting our general terms of business. For each term, explain the risk and a written talk track using, and here's a template, to allow us to push back on the supplier. You've been provided with a set of examples of good and bad responses. If the submitted contract is not for English law, then let the user know that you're not able to help. Having created your recommendations, read back through the provided contract and check that your output represents the biggest risks. If not, add new risks to your output. So remembering what we talked about, what makes up a good prompt. Context, who are you and what's the background to this task? You're being given a contract and you need to check it against our own terms. Some clarity over the request. You need to review this contract, you need to summarize the terms, and you need to fill out this template. Some coaching. You've been provided with a set of examples, some exceptions. If the submitted contract is not for English law, then do this. And then some refinement. Having created your recommendations, read back through it, and so on and so on. So you can see there that we're really guiding the LLM through that. Now, you'll see in this example, I've used some variables just to give you some insight into how the Anthropic Console can help you to improve your prompts. So here are these variables. And if you did not have a draft contract ready to go, if you did not have draft terms ready to go, if you did not have a draft document template, then we can use Claude to actually just generate that for us. And so what Claude is doing in the background here is writing a draft contract, and it will then draft the required terms, and it will then draft a document template for our responses. I'll just let that do. It's doing a very nice long terms and conditions here. And then a document template, subject concerns regarding, okay, excellent. So perfect. So there are our variables that have been created. Next, we're going to look at examples. Now, you may have examples of what a great output looks like, but here we can generate some of these variables just as we did. And I'll let this write again. And then what Claude is going to do is provide an ideal output. I'll just let that build. We're building the supply agreement. We're now building the standard terms and conditions. And then we'll move on to the document template. It's a bit shorter. That's the response to the supplier. And now we can draft the ideal output that we would expect to get from the LLM. Here we go. I can review this contract as it's governed by English law. Here's my analysis, dear supplier. And so that's a good example. Now, you may have your own already examples if you're creating a meeting agenda or whatever that might be. So you may not need the AI to create your examples. Ideally, you should have at least 2 or 3 good examples and at least 1 or 2 bad examples so that the LLM knows what's going on. So here we go. We've got our prompt, we've got our examples. What we can now do is click run, and Claude is going to imagine that we've just received this request. I can help you to review this contract as it's governed by English law. Here are the key risks compared to your standard conditions, standard terms, payment terms, delivery obligations, liability cap, and so on. And that could be your message that you want to send back out to the customer. Now, what you can also, or to the supplier, what you can then do is add that to the conversation, just as if Claude had replied back. And then you could say, as you would in the chat, thanks very much. Can you rewrite this as a talk track that I would have on the phone with the supplier? Please create in a Q&A format, and whatever that might be. So here you can test that conversation out using your prompt. Now, as you go through, you can then delete that and ask a different question, delete that, ask a different question. You could start to add in different examples. You could change your system prompt. This is all about helping you to get a better and better type of output from your LLM. Now, if I delete that and, okay, we're just back now to the original source prompt. If you're working with developers in your team, one of the next outputs here is to click the get code. And this will create, depending on whichever language they're using, you'll actually get the prompt exactly that can be put into your application, whether that's an internal one or customer facing one. So there we go, 20 minutes, quick guide through prompting. The key is don't just start with that empty box and start typing. Use a prompt design template. I'll put the link into the video notes for you to be able to create a copy and use this yourself. And then get into either the Anthropic Console or the chat playground from OpenAI and start testing out and see what you get back. Enjoy.